Hello everyone, it's time for us to figure out how to create an assembly based on the parts of our boxes. So you've already drafted your three parts of your boxes and you're ready to put it together as an assembly. So what you're going to have to do is, first off, it helps to have all three of them open. You want to go to New and then Assembly and just click that once. And that should just clear the screen essentially. Now, what you want to do is you want to place an object. Now, when you place the object, mine automatically popped up because I've already been playing with this. You're going to have to go through your flash drive and find your company name folder. And in this case, I'm calling this folder Assembly Demo because I'm demonstrating creating an assembly. And all of my parts I created already inside this folder, so they exist there. Whenever you create an assembly, it should be as part of a folder that all of the parts you're going to be referencing or using are in that folder. Okay, so my first part, I'm going to put the top down first. Okay, so to do that, I'm just going to double click on the top and it automatically brings it into the field. Now, if you notice right at the end of my cursor, I've got this XYZ axis orientation. That tells you how it's going to drop the part in Inventor. You can change which direction it is facing later on, but it's easiest to place it in the correct orientation. So if you right click, it brings up this menu where you can either rotate the x-axis, rotate the z-axis, or rotate the y. I want to rotate the y-axis because, or I want to rotate it around that y-axis. Well, that didn't do what I thought it would. Sometimes it's best to just play around with it until you get it to the way you want. Okay, so let's try rotating around the x-axis. I want to be able to view this thing from the top and see it as the top. So I should be able to read it when it says top from the top view. You see the top view on my box? So now that I've got it in that orientation, I'm going to click it and drop it. Okay? Cool. Now, however many times I click this thing, it's going to drop another top on there for me. Okay? So in order to get rid of that option, I just have to hit escape. Now, this is the beginning of my assembly. Okay? This thing, if we were to look at it, this box is 5 inches, as it says right there, this direction, and then 4.5 inches that direction. That's the way you want this thing to be oriented. Now, we want to go ahead and we want to add more items to it because we have sides and we have fronts and backs. I'm going to go ahead and just add one of the front first. Okay, now you see how this shows up? If I orbit by holding the shift button and clicking the center, you can see it moves the whole thing so that way I can see if this thing is going to be dropped in the correct orientation. It looks like it mildly will be. So I'm just going to drop one of them right now. Now what the heck, we'll go for 2. Except this back one, I want it to be flipped around the other direction because I want to be able to read that front and back from the back of the box. Or maybe not. We'll leave it like that. So now, I've got these parts lined up here. Okay, now if we look at them from different angles, we'll be able to see that they are not lined up really at all. Okay, so in order to do that, we can try and just haphazardly move it till it looks like it's in the right spot. But by moving our view, we can see that it's not going to do that. It's not going to do what we want it to do. So in order to get it to be locked in place where we want it to be, we have to use what are called constraints. So I'm going to constrain these pieces together. Okay, now there's several different types of constraints. You'll use them all as we go through this. We are using assembly constraints right now because we don't need to have any motion of parts yet, and we don't need any transitions, okay? So right now, we're just going to use a simple mate constraint. And the two options for this are either a mate where the two faces are sharing the same plane, or a flush constraint where the two faces are facing in the same direction but still sharing the same plane. Just to line this up the best, I want to go ahead and first use one of these flush constraints. Then you just want to pick the surfaces that you want to constrain together. So I'm going to pick this surface, and I want that to be flush with the front surface of that part. Did you hear that click sound? That meant that the constraint clicked together and held. Now you see how I can look at this thing? Right now it's in kind of a preview mode to show me that those two surfaces are constrained together. Now if I click OK, that window goes away, and I can take this thing and drag it all over the place. But what you're going to see is that regardless of where it looks like I'm dragging it, wherever I drag it, those two faces are lined up perfectly because they have been constrained together. Okay? So this is a pretty powerful tool. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make one of these mate constraints to try and pull this thing up to here. What I want is for this edge that's the arrow is on right here, I want that to be in contact with this bottom part. Okay, so I've got a mate constraint and a mate constraint selected. I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to click that face. Sometimes it helps to zoom in. Use the wheel on your mouse. Okay, and now it's showing me a preview of it. It made the little clicking sound, and it's showing me a preview of those two sides locked together. Okay, now typically it takes 3 constraints to hold faces of an object together. Now, as a quick trick to avoid closing this window and having to reopen your constraints, if you click apply, that sets that constraint in stone, to say. Now I need now to line up my edges. I can still drag this thing left and right as long as this face of the top and this face of the side don't move either away from each other via that face constraint, the flush constraint we put on first, or this mate constraint that keeps them together. But we can still grab that part. Let me exit out of that. I can still grab this thing and move that part back and forth relative to the top of the box. Okay? So let's get this back to a more reasonable view. And now I want to go ahead and lock this piece in so that way this side is flush with this side. So that way it's locked in on the box. I'm going to go back to my constraints. I'm going to pick a flush constraint because I want this edge right there to be flush with this edge that's right there. Okay? Now, you heard the click. It made that weird wood block sound, and it appears to be correct. So I'm going to click apply to that. And now I've just created my constraints. Now, if you look at it from the right angle, you might be able to see an edge. That's fine. Okay? Now, I'm noticing something. I don't really like the way that my front and my top are the same color. So I want to open up my top. And I'm just going to do this by double clicking on it. And actually, since it's already open, I can do this. I'm going to change my material color. Right now, it's at default. I want it to be, yeah, there's a blue color. Oh, red. There we go. Nice and bright. Okay. Now, oh, that only did the front. I'm going to go ahead and select all my surfaces by holding the Shift button. I can select multiple surfaces, and then I can go ahead and make them all that red color. And so now I've just made this change inside of my part file. If I look at my assembly, it transferred over. Okay, but the key is I've made this change in my part file. I need to save that. Don't make changes without saving. All right, now what we should do is we should go ahead and place our final piece, the side. And do you see how it's not lined up at all with where it would need to be? Like it needs to be kind of turned 90 degrees around that Y. Huh. Well, that would be for the other side. That's fine. There we go. We can drop it right there. If we feel like it, we can go ahead and rotate Y a couple more times, drop it again. So that way we've got one for this right side over here, and then one for the left side over here. That's great. I love it. Faboo. So now we need to start making our constraints. I'm going to go ahead and it doesn't matter what order you make your constraints in, as long as they all work. Okay? So just because I like to, I'm going to make these face mate constraints first. So I'm going to click that face there, and that face, let me zoom in to get it. There we go, that face right there. It just clicked. So let's orbit this thing. Yep, that looks like it's going to be right. Let's click apply. And now I'm going to do this face with that face. All right, so now these two are constrained and locked together. Let's click OK so that way I can show you guys something neat. You see how this can slide anywhere on that? Well, it can slide anywhere on that as long as this face that's facing that way is parallel to the same, or parallel and sharing the same plane as that one. Okay? To finish this thing off, we need to constrain this thing. Flush constraint for this face and either this one or that one. Okay, I'm going to pick the top one. Okay. Now we're going to click apply. Now, do you see all of these things that are right here? Close that out. Constraints are very powerful, but they can also be very annoying because if you constrain the wrong things together, your assembly will not behave like you want it to. Okay, so what the browser allows you to do is by having nothing selected up here in the ribbon and by having no tools active, what you can do is you can hover over each of the constraints and see what those constraints are between. So I'm able to hover over this one and see that this is a flush constraint between those two surfaces that just lit up, whereas this one is a mate constraint between those two surfaces that lit up. That's a very good way to diagnose when you have constraint issues, and you will probably have constraint issues. As with everything else in Inventor, this is a skill that's going to take you some practice and time to learn. As you can see, I've been at this for a little while. I've been doing this for about 14 minutes, and I've gotten 3 pieces constrained together. Take your time, be meticulous, talk your way through it. Okay? Other than that, this is how you constrain pretty much everything. We will go into more detail on other constraints as we need them. Other than that, take care, good luck, and if you have any questions, let me know.